All right, so welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'm super excited to introduce Tim Sparks, the writer and director of AMARAICA, and it's currently streaming on HBO Max. And this is a special guest because he was actually my previous film professor at the University of Miami. So, Tim, how you doing today?
Hey, Sean, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, awesome. So let's just dive right into it. So, Tim, what inspired you to make Amaraika? And is there a personal experience that inspired you to make the film?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get it a lot. So yeah, it's personal relationships that I have through someone that I've been very close to for a long time happened to kind of open my eyes and introduce me to this whole undocumented world that previously was just something I may or may not have had an opinion on, politically or otherwise. But then as I kind of got grafted into the community and started meeting folks and kind of just observing some of the systemic trappings that were here, meaning, and in some ways we invite this type of individual in and hire them and, that type of things. And on the other hand, legally, they're kind of trapped in no man's land. The more I saw that and kind of the hopelessness of it, I just kind of wanted to give voice to it from a unique perspective that I felt I had. And so that's kind of what sparred the movie.
Awesome. Okay. And so stemming off of that question, what are you personally passionate about and what do you look for in a good movie?
Yeah, I really, I'm a student of all kind of films and all kind of genres. I can appreciate them all, but for me, what I'm really passionate about is kind of a narrative that grips you in a way where you kind of leave the film where the way the film leaves you, you're still kind of processing some of it. I always like films like that, not necessarily to be preachy or heavy-handed, but just simply like, let the audience kind of come to their own conclusion. And I'm very passionate about that, filmmaking in general. So
Okay. Awesome.
if there was a second part of that question, refresh my memory.
Yeah, no, so like what specifically do you look for when you're, for in a good movie when you just watch a movie, whether it's streaming or cinema, is there a certain aspect of a film that you look for and determine whether it's good or not?
Yeah, I mean, not to get too general, but I mean, in the first few minutes, does it hook you somehow? And then does it keep you, does it keep you through to the end? So I mean, there's so many layers to film. I mean, we could go on for ages about what kind of grips you in a movie, but ultimately I think great story, no matter what the genre is, I mean, well told is what I'm looking for.
Right. Right. Okay. So what was the journey to get America on HBO Max and, why specifically HBO Max?
Yeah, the journey was no small feat, and I say that with all due respect. I mean, we're a small, indie film. No one, doled out money from a studio for this to be made, right? We're just kind of a bootstrap type of film. So when you make a film like that, obviously you make it with a ton of passion, a ton of heart, not a ton of money, right? So that's the one thing you don't really have. And as a result, you're always kind of fighting an uphill battle. The industry, really rewards stars and, recognizes name talent, whether it's the director, producer, stars, etc. So we'd made the film and had a lot of fun doing it, and then struggled in post to finish it and really mold it into the film it is. And then COVID happened and other things, and none of that's an excuse, but certainly it took time to get where it is now. So we did a small little festival run. I think we were in 12, 13 festivals during the COVID year. And luckily we were in a few, solid festivals, none of the top tier festivals, to be quite honest and frank. We put it out there to the top tier festivals, and, weren't grafted into any of them. And so one of the ones we were, and very grateful for, is New York Latino Film Festival, which actually in some way, shape, or form is sponsored by HBO. And so we were able to be in that festival and actually won, I think it was Best US Narrative or Best US Feature. They have an international award, and we won kind of the Best US one.
That's
And
incredible.
so
Wow.
that kind of put us at least in their awareness, I would say. And then I can't underestimate, and I believe Tom Muska, who's also
Yep.
the great professor up at the university. Tom is the producer of AMARAICA, and so with his gravitas and having done a few deals with HBO in the past, was ultimately able, at the end of our run, at the end of our road, able to help get us in the door. And so can't underestimate hard work
Yeah.
and good relationships on your team.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what were some of the differences of, shooting an international movie compared to one, based in the US? Because I know, I saw throughout the movie, on the Mexican border and so forth, and geographically it's just outside of the US. So how is that process in comparison to ones you make in the US?
I mean, it definitely, it's a unique process, especially on the low budget side. So when we filmed in Texas, California, and in Mexico. So at each of those various locations, we had different crews. So besides myself, the DP, and the two leads, each time we moved from state or country, we had an entire new crew down there. So you have to be able to crew up, communicate, and obviously, having spent so much time on the US side, then you have limited time across the border for all kind of reasons, money reasons, safety reasons, all that factors in. But you have to hit the ground running. So you have to make sure you have a runway of good communication with your crew down there, so that when you hit the ground, you are ready to roll, and roll quick, and then move on, get out of there. Just because, border towns are not the safest places in the world. And, that's where we were filming on the Mexican side, was in border towns. So,
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. So what were some of the, I mean, were there any, specific challenges that arise like while on set that you had to, overcome, or was it a fairly,
Yeah.
smooth sailing process?
Yeah, I would say, because we scouted all the Mexican locations via email, and, hey, here, what do you think of this? So we were picking locations out by picture, but we never actually walked those streets before going down there. So
Right.
when we arrived, we realized that many of the locations we'd picked in the city, for lack of a better term, was like the red light district of this border town, that had a conglomerate of characters that you may not want to be hanging out with, combined with, drugs, and,
Oh, wow.
the things associated with people being addicted to drugs and such in Mexico. So,
Wow.
man, we're sitting there on set. No matter how small of a footprint you try to have, you got a camera, you got lights, you got
Yeah.
sound booms, you make an obvious, you're pretty obvious. And so we definitely had to switch one location, which I'll tell you kind of off camera the real story, but
Yeah.
let's just say it wasn't the type of location where we should be. And we realized that pretty quick. Then we kind of pivoted to a cross the street location. And, for lack of a better term, it's like the homeless population that happened to be kind of, uh, drug, many of them had drug habits and stuff. They would invade our set when we're,
Wow.
when we're filming and asking for money and doing other things that I also won't say on camera, but it was quite crazy. One final story. So when we went across the street, and you've seen the film, we're kind of in an alleyway where the
Right.
husband and wife are kind of like meeting each other after
Right.
being
Yep.
deported.
Yep.
And so like on the other side of the wall is a gentleman's club blaring this extremely loud music.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's like, you're not getting good sound. You had no idea the gentleman's club was there when so
Right.
it
Right.
was quite chaotic. So we had to think on our feet. And then we wanted to be at the border at sunset, at the border wall.
Right.
So, we had to get those shots in, deal with the nuances of that neighborhood, and then drive across town to the border wall to hit that sunset. So
Wow. Wow.
what an experience.
Yeah. Well, so to, in order to complete the entire shooting of the film, like how long was that process? Was it a couple months or was it like half a year or?
I think the initial principal photography, you mean the
Yeah, the actual filming of like the actual production process,
yeah.
not pre-production and so forth, just the actual filming of it.
Yeah, the initial principal photography was 24 days, meaning it was about a 30-day process, a few days off here and there, travel days, but
Okay.
actual 24 days filming. And then after being in post for, call it 6 months,
Wow.
we came back and did, I think, 2 days of pickups where we
Okay.
realized, there were hole here, hole there in the story that we needed to patch in. So we did another day or two of pickups.
Wow. That's incredible. Wow. So, so what was the casting process like for the lead roles then? I mean, they were really, talented actors and, I just by the end of the movie, I was like almost like crying at the end when I won't say any spoilers, but oh my God, that really just hits a chord.
Yeah, again, luckily I had a great producing team. One of the producers' name is Elpidia Carrillo, who is a Mexican-born actress who has a career in Hollywood. And so I had sent her my script kind of early on just to see if she had interest in being a part of the team. And she gravitated to the material. And I had already kind of started the casting process here in the US.
Right.
And she asked me, and this is just full disclosure. So she's like, well, let me see who you're casting or who you're considering. And she stopped me and says, you can't cast that way. And so, she educated me on why I couldn't. And she's like, we've got to go down to Mexico City or Mexico and cast the leads for multiple reasons. And she made a lot of sense. And it was almost like making myself look stupid. It's like, why didn't I think of that? Where it was like, they really need to come from Mexico, have the fresh, the accents that are convincingly real, where their English isn't perfect, all those nuances.
Mhm.
And so she helped connect me with a casting director and
Mhm.
several actors she knew down in Mexico City. And we held a little audition, had self tapes go on, and we're able to find our two leads that way. Aldo Verostegui and Karina Lechuga, who are fantastic actors. And, for a small, low budget film like we are and were, to find actors who can actually kind of carry the picture was a tremendous asset. And I can't thank them enough. They were 120% every day, all day. And we wore them into the ground with lots of work and little pay. But
Right.
You know, in the end, their performances do kind of jump off the screen if you'll give the film a shot, you know.
No, absolutely. No, I was definitely, convincing performances and, as, for the audience, I'm not going to say any spoilers, but this is definitely like a tearjerker, especially towards the end of the movie. Wow. That is
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah. But okay, so, so we went through kind of the production process. So what are some of the major themes and modern issues that are addressed in the film? Yeah, so like I'll just let you take.
Yeah, I think the theme we tried to address, at least from the character's perspective, the main character's perspective, was one of the convergence of, number one, survival,
Mhm.
with, out of left field, having to then take on caring for someone else that you didn't anticipate caring for, and how those interests are in direct conflict. So in terms of the survival, it's not like surviving in a wilderness, it's surviving in a country where you're unwelcomed or unwanted, right? That
Right.
takes on a survival path of its own. It's a legal path or a lack of legal path. And just my main character's dealing with that. And unbeknownst to him, something he's not planning, expecting, or desiring in any way, you know, he finds out he's going to be a father. And this is like coming from left field. He doesn't believe it, and it, you know, that information, at first he wants to ignore it. He doesn't want to take the high ethical road. He wants to ignore it and just say, that ain't me. And not to give too much about the film away, but that's the theme of survival. I mean, it's a dog eat dog world. I'm going to take care of myself. But then eventually, as he kind of opens his awareness up, realizing that he also has to take on the role of a caretaker.
Right.
And so I wanted to watch how they converge. What's the outcome? Because they're counterintuitive themes.
Right. Right. And with that being said, what do you feel needs to change? Because I noticed some of the things that were addressed in the film, in terms of like the injustices that, possibly like immigrant children face sometimes. Like, what are some of the things that you feel need to change in the world, and and how does that link to what you were trying to say in the film?
Yeah, I think the conversation that the film really tries to, you know, resonate is, and by the way, I try to stay away from politics in the film, even though it's a pretty intense political issue. We don't take the angle of politics. We
Right.
take the angle of the human element of the story. Just
Right.
these folks are just trying hard, and we're on that journey with them. Um, so the conversation I think that we were trying to leave with the audience is, you know, there's immigration, there's borders, and in every country, there's nothing unique about a border and an immigration system. Every country at some level deals with it, right?
Mhm.
But interestingly enough, what makes the United States the quote unquote land of the free and home of the brave, the quote unquote superpower of the world, who tries to lead on human rights issues all around the world. I'm not saying they do. I'm just saying that's the front of the American front. It's so ironic that then the way we're dealing with immigration as it pertains to children is as such that you see in my film. That's something I find grossly inhumane. And unfortunately, both sides of the aisle play, you know, pickleball with this group of people. But I just, for me, the conversation is, man, how are we treating kids,
Right.
you know, this way?
Right.
So,
Oh, that
you
makes
know,
sense. Yeah. And also, so what are some of the previous movies that you had directed, prior to this one, and what was the genre that you were dabbling in?
Yeah, I mean, I've done quite a few. This, by the way, being my feature debut. So I'd produced several features, but not directed one. So this was my directorial feature debut. But I'd done a lot of shorts over the course of many years, and I've done all genres from, action to thriller to, period pieces, all that. And really, the way I always treated shorts, and not everyone treats a short film this way, but for me, I was always interested in learning an aspect of filmmaking in my short that I was really trying to stretch my muscle in. For instance, doing a period piece. I didn't have the budget for the period piece, but just could I pull it off? Could I pull off the costumes? Could I pull off the settings?
Right.
And half the films I made are total failures from a story perspective, just to be quite frank. But I always wanted to push myself in a direction where it's like I have takeaways. Aha, I learned this, I learned that, and try to put it into my feature. Not saying all those lessons made it in, but I've never been one to be afraid of what I call failing forward. There's safe ways. You can play it safe in filmmaking, right?
Right.
You can play it safe, hit a softball. I've always been one who's like, I'm not really interested in playing it safe here. Let me learn and explore, have something to take away from it. Uh,
Right.
all that to say, I've done the gamut of short films in every genre, and you know, was always just looking for an interesting, ending. I think I always am trying to play with how to end a film
Right.
in a way that it doesn't wrap it up in a bow. And there's nothing wrong with wrapping it in a bow,
Right.
because Hollywood does it every day.
And was that, specifically how Amarico was different? Like, was that, so for example, you had a certain approach with your short films. Was that something very specific about being risky and maybe, changing up the endings and so forth? Was that the main difference?
Yeah, I mean, you could say in the end, I think there's a lot of differences, because doing a feature film the way we did it with very little money and all that's kind of a bonehead thing to do. I mean, to actually pull that off is no easy thing. Um, but yeah, I didn't want the film to feel like it was resolved, because I thought the issue, out of respect for the issue and out of respect for the conversation that I was trying to have arise from the film, I thought leaving it unresolved and let the audience determine what is that resolution. What
Right.
was definitely a unique angle compared to other films I'd made. Yes.
Right. No, I know you left us wanting more, like at least me specifically, like, just
Yeah.
and I don't want to give anything away, but there's definitely, oh my gosh, I want more.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was awesome. So, okay, so with that, what are your thoughts on the rise of streaming versus traditional cinema? Because, you speak about short films, and I know the world is kind of moved towards, shorter content and so forth. So, what is your take on, streaming versus traditional cinema?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say I'm on HBO Max, which is a streaming service, and I'm very grateful to be on that platform. So, you know, um, that being said, I'm going to date myself a little bit and say, I'm an old soul who grew up in the theater. And there's something, I think, amazingly unique about the shared experience, the locked in experience. It's like you go to the theater, you're sitting there until that film's over, you're sharing that with, potentially hundreds of folks in the same. In a lot of ways, I think it elevates the film experience, right?
Right.
Not to take away from what streaming is. I mean, streaming's brought, you know, movies and great television to the masses. And now, we have more entertainment in the flick of our, remote than, 15 years ago, you had it at, in a year. I mean, you couldn't consume that much. So I think it's pushed the medium forward in a lot of ways, the streaming. So for all the positive things it does, I like. But I'm an old soul who, when you find that movie you've been waiting for all year, that actor, that genre piece, it's like, man, going to the theater was where it was at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, do you think, moving forward, obviously it's hard to predict, but with the pandemic and everything, do you think that movie going experience where we go to the theater and, go see it on the big screen, do you think it's ever going to be the same?
You know what? If you're asking me that now, I'm going to say no, I don't. It's not because I wish it ill. I wish it would, but I don't see at the moment. Streaming's just kind of tipped the balance with the amount of content they're
Right.
able to deliver, and I think it's going to be those special films that are, for whatever reason, either they're Oscar buzz special or they're, blockbuster, summer blockbuster special. I think it's going to be a smaller group of films that really draws us out. At least that's my perspective at this time.
Right, right. So also, well, so looking back, what is your favorite movie of all time and why?
Man, that's the ultimate question, right? I mean, there's so many great from
Yeah.
history and different eras and genres. I'm going to pick a relatively modern, not fully modern one, that I'll say, if you've ever seen No Country for Old Men,
Oh yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
Coen
Fantastic.
Brothers film.
Yeah. I
Um,
kind of got that vibe a little bit from your movie. Like
I
as a
wish, man, that
yeah.
film is so,
Yeah.
in so many ways, it's like so perfect. I mean, they don't even use the score in the film at
Yeah.
all, and it's just like you never need that score.
Right. And
Um,
Javier Bardem, that performance
oh,
is just
yeah,
unbelievable.
the acting, all, just there's so many layers to that film. So I would say if I ever would strive to make a film, it'd be something like that. Like, could I ever do it? We'll see. But yeah, No Country for Old Men for sure.
Awesome, awesome. So, what is your advice to upcoming filmmakers?
I think the one piece of advice, and the thing I actually learned the most, in making the film America and kind of going through this years long journey of getting it to where it is, it's just be bold about the films you want to make, and don't second guess yourself.
Right,
You're always going to learn. You're always going to make mistakes. I mean, no doubt about it.
right,
But go for the film you want to make, right?
right.
And there were moments in time, and I'm not downcasting myself. There were moments in time where I second guessed myself, or doubted what I really want, or tailored it back. And you realize, man, with so much time invested, don't shortchange yourself in the process.
Right.
And at the other thing I would tell, any filmmaker starting off or whatever, it's a long process. It's a marathon. Don't get in a hurry. Do it right. Make sure at every phase you're in, the writing phase and the pre-production phase, each one becomes the most important phase while you're in it. And they all stair step upon each other. So give 100% effort at the script level. Don't say, oh, we'll figure that out on set, and then on and up that goes until you're done with the editing process. It's all full effort. Don't shortchange any of it, because if you get up here with all this full effort and you realize, man, your script sucked or there were holes in it, and with respect, I learned some of those hard lessons on this film. So, give it your all early and often.
Right, right. Well, Tim, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And, just thank you so much for your time. And everyone who's viewing, please go check out Amarica on HBO Max. It's a fantastic film, and it's such a riveting one as well, with a great message deep down. So please go check that out. And thank you all so much for tuning in, and I can't wait to see you again soon.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course.